Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the SLT millimeter wave learning series, our free EMF educational series discussing 5G radiation and millimeter wave. Today's topics include the effects of EMF and millimeter waves presented by Lloyd, the effects of RF and millimeter wave sources presented by Magda. Then we have Rob and Bruce are going to introduce us to the millimeter wave meter and the difference of 5G frequencies and measurement protocols. And we have Keith, who's going to do new discoveries of millimeter wave sources. And then last but not least is Orem, and he will be doing the hunting millimeter wave towers in Southern California. So without any delay.
Next on our list, we have Keith Cutter, who was original beta tester for our meter. And he has made some discoveries that are kind of unexpected. And we asked Keith to come forward and present his discoveries in this session. So I will turn it over to Keith now, and let's try and get your screen shared properly there, Keith.
Okay. And I apologize if my screen share looks a little bit different. I wasn't trying to be a rebel here, but this is what I'm able to do. Are you able to hear me and see the screen share okay?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm going to be talking about other than millimeter wave exposures associated with smartphones and smartphone infrastructure. So we're looking at all the things, or not all the things, but at least two of the things that are millimeter wave and don't have to do with smartphones or the infrastructure that supports smartphones.
Excuse me, Keith, for one sec. Would you be able to turn your volume up just a touch?
Is that any better?
It is, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So by way of brief introduction, I'm a 38-year survivor of what I call electromagnetic poisoning, who's learned how to build non-native EMF resilience. And now I spend my time helping other survivors as well as clients wanting to take a precautionary approach to harmful man-made electromagnetic radiation. I do assessments, remediation, and design services. I produce a weekly syndicated podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google, other platforms, primarily for other poisoning survivors, and a more mainstream offering on YouTube with the handle at EMF Remedy. So I thought I and my clients were safe. Safe from millimeter wave RF exposure here in what I like to call the majestic inland Northwest. I thought we were safe due to the rugged terrain and the low population density, which are usually great things for avoiding RF exposure, thinking that would make it unlikely that they would implement millimeter wave 5G here. And I think that's true. I think we're going to be spared that, at least for a while. As a beta tester for Safe Living Technologies' new millimeter wave RF meter, I learned that we are safe now from the millimeter wave 5G, but not millimeter wave RF from other sources. In fact, there seems to be plenty. So my conclusion is that areas that are thought to be safe from 5G millimeter wave deployment have, I'll just say, unexpected challenges with millimeter wave RF exposure. And areas already exposed to 5G millimeter wave deployment will have additional unexpected millimeter wave exposure. And I just want to note parenthetically that for myself, and as well as for my sensitive clients, I'm always looking for that thing that unexpectedly makes one of my clients ill. We think we've identified every source, and they're feeling terrible. And I feel like this new meter has opened up a new world of finding things that I think may be contributing. And now that we recognize them, we can take certain steps to minimize. So today I'm going to be talking about two types of exposure. Rob has already alluded to one that will unfortunately affect almost everyone. I mean, who doesn't visit grocery stores, for example? Who doesn't spend time on or near vehicle byways? So we'll also be talking about ways to minimize personal exposure. And let's talk first about supermarkets. So here's the problem. The door sensors, which control the portals of entry, the sliding doors that open automatically as you enter and exit, here in the inland Northwest anyway, and I suspect across the US and possibly beyond, all of my regional and national grocery stores bathe their customers with extreme levels of millimeter wave RF. So in order to get at the goodies inside the store, you have to go through these portals. You have to enter the store in some fashion. And if you go through these doors, these self-opening doors, in every case in my area, you're going to be exposed to millimeter wave radiation. So we have 3 regional chains and 1 national chain in the immediate area where I live. With the new Safe and Sound Pro millimeter wave RF meter, I entered and exited each store 3 times. That's the mathematician in me, because I wanted to average the numbers. I regretted it after the first store because I felt sick just from going in and out of the door 3 times. Anyway, the averages are shown here, and they range from just over 11,000 microwatts per square meter to just under 23,000. And I can't help feeling, like I alluded to before, why I've felt for the last many years slightly disoriented when I enter a supermarket. Does anybody else have that experience? You know, I thought it was maybe the lighting and the other unnatural features of the in-store environment, and now I'm wondering what part millimeter wave exposure plays. So I'll say this, you know, again, after entering and exiting 3 times, I definitely felt it. So since I've been around for a little while now, I know you don't need millimeter wave RF for controlling a door opener. There are many other options. In my life, I've seen pressure mats, as sort of usually like a rubberized surface in front of the door. And that's the first incarnation I remember of automatic opening doors, but they worked fine. It just completed a circuit when you stepped on the mat and the door swung open. Next that I recall were photoelectric eyes. So like a flashlight sort of a thing on one side and a photoelectric eye on the other. And when you walk through the beam, the doors would swing open, and that worked fine as well. Doorman, you know, that worked as well. So all of which open the doors without any RF exposure. I'm sure there are other technologies as well. So I'm left wondering, why do all the stores in my area, like every single one of them, using millimeter wave tech for this? Is it worth the potential harm? Do we risk burying an epidemiological signal that millimeter wave exposure is harmful by exposing everyone? That's really, you know, what I'm wondering. Would you pay an extra penny, an item, to pay a doorman/greeter? I don't know. I would. So I have to tell you about my ridiculous camera and meter setup for the purpose of sharing something on video. And I just want to say, I'm going to run a couple of video clips, one for this and one for the vehicle situation. And it was a real Rube Goldberg kind of a contraption, as I recall. It had a cardboard box and a piece of shelving and a liberal amount of gaffer's tape. So this is not how I would collect data when doing an assessment, but was more a desire to be able to keep the meter in focus and give some sense of the ambience of what's going on. So what we're going to do here in just a moment, we're going to look at a video, and when we start the video, we're going to go through the 2 doorways, and you'll be able to see the new millimeter wave product. You'll see the light on the top going from a safer to a less safe area from left to right. as well as the numbers climbing as well. And you'll be able to hear the meter as well. So let's go ahead and see if this works here.
Is there sound, Keith? Because we're not hearing it.
Okay, so I hope that audio was reasonable.
We didn't hear any audio.
Oh, well, I apologize for that. I'll get this posted online so you can take a listen at your leisure.
Thank you.
All right, so here's what you can do to minimize personal exposure. So number one would be shop elsewhere. If you're able to find a reseller, a grocery store that has manually operated doors, you might consider shopping there. I found one supermarket that had a door that you could push and enter. It was for the delicatessen, but you could access the entire store from there. And it did not have this, millimeter wave feature. So maybe there'd be a store near you where that is a possibility. You may want to consider home delivery or curb delivery as a way of avoiding this exposure. And if you must enter a millimeter wave controlled portal, you might want to not spend unnecessary time before, between, or after the doors. In particular, between the inner and the outer doors. I notice a lot of stores will have a bench there. It's probably not a good place to wait for somebody. You might want to move away quickly from the door safely and avoid spending time near the doors. And also, I found that the checkout stands in some of the stores that were nearest the doors had a considerable amount of millimeter wave exposure. So that's grocery stores and some ideas for avoiding. Rob talked about the vehicular radar systems and the fact that they emit millimeter wave RF radiation as well. Early ones seem to emit maybe just in the back, and then as things evolved, we're seeing emissions from the front and the back and both sides as well. So there's a picture of a truck, and the telltale signs of millimeter wave emitters, you can see them usually in the back of the vehicle. Sometimes you'll see them in the front of the vehicle, and some vehicles have no indication whatsoever of the emitters. So you can't really go by whether you see those little dots in order to determine whether there's millimeter wave exposure. So I think virtually everyone in the population, just like shopping and going in and buying something to eat, is going to be frequenting the byways, if only as a pedestrian or somebody shopping, if not driving. The problem is that the new conveniences in automobiles are being powered by this millimeter wave technology. So depending on the model, this may involve, as I say, emissions from the front, rear, and both sides. So circles illustrate the millimeter wave emitters on this vehicle. This is a test report. It's for a 2020 Lincoln Nautilus. And you can see the highlighted information there that it's emissions, intentional emissions, in the range between 22 and 24 gigahertz. This is a license exempt ISM band, I believe. And it's a fairly easy process. Rob outlined one way is to look in the owner's manual my son had a friend who had an older vehicle, and they did not have the FCC data, for example. So with that vehicle, which was a 2010 Ford Fusion, what I was able to do was look at the terminology that they were using. And the terminology that was used in that vehicle was reverse sensing system. And then using that information, I did a search online with the model number of the car, and I quickly was able to find the replacement module. And they're very inexpensive, by the way, and you can get them on eBay and other places. But once you have the part that is installed, you can go backwards and sort of get the FCC or other agency information about it. So are these systems and the like contributing to the difficulty myself and my clients are feeling? And it's already been mentioned that the millimeter waves easily pass through glass and enter adjacent vehicles. So some of the conveniences are being marketed as adaptive cruise control, collision avoidance, automatic emergency braking, reverse sensing system, and this all seems to be part of the intelligent transportation system vision. So, I guess my questions would be whether the convenience of some of these things is worth exposing everyone to millimeter wave RF. We've lived a long time without it. Is it worth the potential harm? And the same comment about the potential for losing an epidemiological signal, if you will. So we're going to have another video here. We've got my ridiculous, not very portable camera setup. I can't tell you how many hours I spent trying to get video of cars going by with the meter in focus and with the cars in focus. So this is the best I could do. And anyway, what you're going to see and hear, it's a short clip, but it's vehicles going by that have the radar capability, and you'll be able to see activity on the meter. And yeah, so we're going to take a look at that next. All right, I'm just curious, was the audio better on that one or no?
We could hear that, yes, and you could see the LEDs go from green to yellow, orange.
Yeah. And I just want to reemphasize that that's not the way I would take meter readings, and that antenna was actually in completely the wrong orientation. So the actual signal strength of those sources was much greater than the camera setup would have indicated. So the findings are, commonly found exposures in the extreme range greater than 1,000 microwatts per square meter, emissions from all sides, that the millimeter wave easily penetrates glass, and it was not difficult for me to acquire readings from between 20 and 50 feet distance. So the implications, obviously the byways, our roadways and highways are now being contaminated with millimeter wave radiation, and untreated window glass provides no protection, but there are other concerns as well. So let's take a look. My wife and my favorite restaurant, it makes me sick every time I go there because of the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth-based music system and customer cell phones and whatnot. But we still go there with regularity. We'd love to go there once a week if we can. And living in a shielded home, I've gained resilience, so it gets easier and easier as time goes by. But we go there regularly because we love the owner and their family, and the food is nourishing and whatnot. But now I believe I know why we had, even before I'd received this meter, we had given up the sidewalk dining and we had retreated back into the restaurant. So I believe the additional millimeter wave radiation exposure from the passing automobiles was making me that much sicker, that much faster. So the point is that knowing where the dangers are helps to avoid the dangers. Residences adjacent to roadways will be affected if they have untreated glass facing the roadway. And of course, car travel is now problematic. The more cars, the more of this type of radiation. So survival tactics here, it's a bit more difficult. I would say carefully consider whether you want a vehicle, whether you want to invest in and support an industry that puts this in their vehicles. Avoid traveling in vehicles with radar. Although just because your vehicle doesn't have radar doesn't mean you won't get it from the other vehicles around. Avoid sidewalk dining, avoid living arrangements near roadways, and as an extreme measure, speak to your trusted EMF resource in your area about vehicular shielding, and Rob alluded to that. So I hope this has been helpful. I want to thank you, Rob, for allowing me to participate in this event, and I'll turn it back over to you now.
Okay, great, Keith. Thanks for that succinct and great presentation. And thanks for all your detective work with the millimeter wave meter, and thanks for sharing those discoveries. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people to get out there and start measuring these millimeter waves. And I think we're going to get a lot of surprises. They're going to be in places we don't expect them. And even though in Canada, we technically don't have millimeter waves transmitting in the cellular band, they could be testing, they could be out there still. So we need to go through and do some hunting and discovering and seeing what's really out there. But thank you again, Keith.